Item 10D, provide direction to staff regarding alternative ordinances to regulate the inspection, repair, and replacement of private sewer laterals at the time of sale of residential property.
Honorable Mayor, Council Member, the purpose of the presentation tonight to seek your policy direction for the development of the ordinance. On the January 25th and February 11th meeting, staff presented to you the importance of maintaining the structural integrity of our sewer system to protect public health and property, preventing the sewer overflow. Our sewer system master plan addresses the long-term need of the system for proper and effective maintenance and sustainability of the system. What is not included in our sewer master plan, how to improve the structural reliability of the private lateral, which are part of the system, but are privately owned and maintained by our residents. The private lateral is the connection between the homes and our sewer main. At those prior meetings, you were presented with alternatives how to properly address the requirement and the need for inspection and repair of those sewer laterals at the time of the sale of the property. Also at those meetings, you were presented with the experience of other agencies around us, how they are addressing the same issues. After very robust discussion at this council member by you, and based on your feedback and following up on concerns raised by you, what you have in front of you tonight, 4 alternative addressing the need for inspection and repair of the private lateral. The first alternative would require inspection and repair of private lateral at the time of the sale of the property for homes built between 40 and 60 for Orangeburg only. The second alternative would require inspection and repair of private lateral at the time of the sale for homes built between 40 and 60, but for all pipes. The third alternative would require inspection and repair for homes built up to 1960 for all pipes. The fourth alternative, which is a new alternative for your consideration, would require inspection and repair of private lateral for all homes older than 25 years at the time of the sale of the property. After following up and further considering your comment on the first alternatives and considering the impact on private property owner of the visual inspection to make a distinction between the type of pipe what the lateral is made of, the staff does not strongly recommend that alternative, which is the most narrower alternative among all of those alternatives any longer. Since our last discussion on this subject, staff had discussion and meeting with SEMCAR, and Marc Zafferano will give you an update what the discussion, the concern raised, and also how those concerns are possibly can be addressed, and also he will share with you the possible time frame of your actions.
Thank you, Klara. It's important for the City Council to remember that prior to this staff report and prior to staff's meeting with SAMCAR, representatives of whom are in the audience today, and we expect will tell you about their general opposition to point-of-sale ordinances, The ordinance that staff proposed included a 6-month grace period that would apply after the close of escrow. And so at that time, staff felt that that provision, which was similar to one that South San Francisco implemented, would, in essence, not hold up any escrow, irrespective of when the property was sold, because the property owner would then have 6 months to repair the lateral afterward. But having said that, when we sat down and met with SAMCAR, they came up with 3 other suggestions that staff thought were worthy of your consideration. And we've put those in the staff report, and let me just quickly go over those for you. The first one was a suggestion that the ordinance apply to residential units where there are 4 or fewer units, as opposed to all residential units. And so that's something that you may wish to consider. And that's something that we can apply to any of the alternatives that you choose. The second possibility, or the second point that SAMCAR had raised for us that we think is a good one, is that we should count only sales that involve payment of some money or consideration, and those are reflected by the payment of a transfer tax to the county. So for example, if your home is in a living trust and you wish to refinance it, the home has to come out of the trust, you have to refinance it, it goes back in the trust. Well, under the ordinances that were previously presented, that would be a transfer, and so you'd have to fix your sewer lateral. We don't think that's necessarily an appropriate burden to place on property owners when they're not actually selling their property, they're just merely transferring it for no consideration, either for convenience or financing purposes. So that's an item that we think could certainly be included in the ordinance. And then finally, I think a very important suggestion that was made was to have the ordinance, no matter which one it is, applicable only to properties that are that enter escrow after the effective date of the ordinance. In other words, we don't want to intend to capture all of those properties. If the ordinance is adopted on day number 1, there's already a bunch of properties in escrow, and we don't intend to capture all of those properties. We would intend only to capture properties that open escrow after the effective date of the ordinance. So when would the effective date of any ordinance be? Well, whatever of the 4 alternatives you select, we are in the process, as you know, of negotiating an agreement with Baykeeper that would, in essence, count the 300 or to 400 sewer laterals that are going to be replaced or repaired up in the Glenview neighborhood. And so we're hoping to come to a final agreement with them on what, in essence, would be a 1-year delay on implementing the ordinance. So that year, if we're able to finalize that agreement, that year would give both certainly the real estate community and any individual seeking to sell their home, we think, quite a sufficient amount of time to plan for the inspection and upgrading or repair of their sewer lateral if that were necessary under any of the ordinances. Finally, as far as your action tonight, the agreement with Baykeeper does require that the city manager present and recommend to you an ordinance, which we all did by February 15. That was done. You have 60 days to take final action on that ordinance, and in essence, a total of 90 days to finally adopt it. So what staff is recommending is that you review the alternatives that we've set forth, direct staff as to which of those alternatives you prefer. We will then come back to you at the next meeting with an ordinance that incorporates that alternative and any of the additional features that we've discussed with SAMCAR and which they have recommended. That concludes my report.
Good. Any questions of staff? Irene?
I have one to start with. I don't understand the reasoning for not including residents that have, or excluding residents that have more than 4 residential units. So are you saying an apartment house that has 6 units would be excluded from this? Why would that
That was SAMCAR's recommendation, and perhaps Mr. Stewart can explain why they're interested in that.
Well,
Go ahead.
because otherwise I would think it would be almost the opposite. You have more sewage coming through a lateral because of the greater number of residents in a smaller area than you do if you have 6 individual houses. So I don't, unless you can compel me that I'm wrong, which is possible, I don't understand the reasoning for that.
Okay, any other questions? Staff? All right.
Hello, it's Bob Marshall, Poplar Avenue, also with Marshall Realty and Genevan Avenue. One of the reasons for the 4 or fewer is the term residential unit came up when they were doing it. And in real estate terms, a residential unit is 4 or less. Anything above 4 is considered a commercial building. Commercial structures are exempt from this ordinance, if I remember it correctly. And so we wanted to stipulate that 4 or 5 or more is considered a commercial unit. And we also wanted to exempt condominiums in this because they're exempt from the proposed ordinance also. Does that answer your question?
It answers the technical part and the legal definition of it. I can understand that. But if all our goal is to reduce sewer overflows, that part doesn't make any sense. I can understand commercial because there's a different volume of people.
5 or more in real estate is considered commercial. It's a whole different ordinance with loans, it's, with contracts and everything. And and we're in agreement. If the whole intent is to stop the sewage, let's get them all. Let's not get them at point of sale. Let's find the bad areas of town. Let's find where the Orangeburg and the leaks are, and let's go after those, whether you're selling a house or not. So I agree with that part of your comment 100%.
But even if we change it, are you still, say we change this totally and do something different and say, okay, we're going to start with X, Y, and Z and go here, there, and everywhere. Are you suggesting that even if we did that, you would still ask us to exclude residential residential units that have more than 4 units?
The ordinance was read to us. The proposed ordinance was read to us as residential units and commercial is exempt. We asked, what about commercial? And they said it is exempt. So we said it does, so residential is 4 or less. And our answer to that was yes from the staff.
So if I may just clarify that, I think the confusion results from the use of the word residential for in real estate versus the notion that a residential unit is one that is being occupied as a residential use and not a commercial use. And so while the apartment complex might be a commercial use for the owner, nevertheless it's a residential use for the tenant who's flushing the toilet. So I think that the point would be, does it make sense to limit the ordinance only to residential units including 4 or fewer units, or do we want to also cover apartment buildings and other types of residential uses? That's the issue.
Okay, if I may. Sure. So if we change the language in the ordinance to include any residential structure, or however, what the legal thing would be, that would be all right, as long as it's clear?
Are we including condominiums? Are we including Shelter Creek, Peninsula Place?
So, I'm sorry, just to clarify, the ordinance that was previously presented to the council did not include condominiums. They were exempt.
And is there reasons not to include condominium? I just assumed since people live in a condominium that was a resident, so bad on me, I did not realize that they were excluded. So we either need to include them specifically, is that what you're saying? Or that's one piece. And then is there a physical reason not to include them? I mean, if our ultimate goal is to lower sewer spills, is there a physical reason not to include condominiums?
So I don't know the answer to that exactly tonight. I believe that one of the possibilities is that condominiums are covered by a homeowners association, and there may be separate responsibilities that the HOA has. That may have been a reason why none of the other ordinances that we reviewed included condominiums, and it also excluded cooperative apartment complexes, I think, for that similar reason.
Okay, that makes sense to me. So if somebody is taking care of that part in a condominium complex, then
And also to
Well-
follow up what Marc said, probably is a reason for the physical configuration of in each case is different, that some depending on the size, they also have internal collectors or mains, which
Okay.
basically individual so-called should be laterals connecting to, and not necessarily those are even maintained by the city. They are maintained by the association themselves. I really don't
Okay.
know case by case what is the number of units which would require the existence of different physical consideration, but maybe all of us at staff level can have some more follow-up and discussion for your next meeting, just to make sure that really is clarified by staff.
Okay, and I appreciate the, if I may continue, I appreciate the physical logic of that. And then if there's a similar physical logic to the more than 4 residential units, if they're stacked and you can't tell who's responsible for it, well, however, I would like that, just as you said, give us a little more information about it and see how it is. But I appreciate you bringing up the difference and letting us, me anyway, know that that was there. Thank you.
And just, since I bring it started, so am I hearing from staff then, what was presented and what is presented excludes condos? Is that a yes or a no?
Yes.
And am I hearing that what was proposed and what is proposed excludes units of greater than 4?
That's what's currently on the table for your consideration tonight.
So that was not in the prior or current excluded?
Correct.
Okay, I appreciate all those questions because that was helping me out. I just wanted to clarify.
So the issue with this is that in a condominium, there's numerous owners, and in an apartment building, there's one owner. So we're tackling the owner and their responsibility versus an association that has multiple owners.
I think that's right.
Okay. All right. Whether or not that is a 6-unit apartment building with one owner versus a 6-unit condominium with 6 different owners.
In preparing the ordinance, we gained heavily by the experience and the example of others. And I'm told that all of the ordinances that we reviewed addressed residential properties, and with the clarification of 4 units or less being the item we're bringing forward to you tonight, and understanding your interest and your consideration. I think some of these logistical issues about how a property is treated, certainly with a condominium that may have a joint lateral structure, such as the director indicated, might be very, very difficult and perhaps impossible to capture on a sales transaction ordinance. We would like to look a little bit further at the general concept of both the commercial properties as well as multifamily residential with a single property owner, and may be able to get a little bit more clarification that we don't have tonight.
Do you have anything?
I have no more questions. I'd like to make a statement about this, so if you want to. Okay. First of all, I would appreciate the continued information or augmented information. I think I understand the point of sale concerns that real estate people have, but I think staff did a good job in having the grace period. So I think that should stay in, the 6 months should stay in, the point of sale should stay in, and what I would like to do with that is address it a year after the ordinance takes place with some statistics to show if it's being effective or not, if it's really addressing the needs. Maybe we'll find that it doesn't force anyone, or not force, but require anyone to change their laterals because it's not the right areas or whatever. So if we keep statistics about where the sales are and then how much this affects them, and that would be appreciated, and I think we should readdress it in a year, or a year from when we start. That's one. Another thing I'd like to see, if, however, whoever agrees or not, we put the date of, well, let me rephrase that. I would like to strongly support number 3, and I'd like to have it, if it's possible, to structure it so that every 10 years it increases by 10 years. So this year it says 1960. So in 10 years it says 1970. So we capture the 10-year older housing, if that makes sense. So we don't have to, every 10 years, we don't have to say, well, it's just 1960. That's one. I agree with the real estate people. It should be actually sold, not just transferred. And then also with the recommendation that this is not enacted until after all the things that are in escrow, once we do it, are settled. So we don't want to impose anything on people that have already started selling, and we'll give them that year if the baykeepers agree for them to do what they need to do. So that's my position.
Sam Carr, do you have some comments?
Perhaps just to add a little background. My name is Paul Stewart. I'm with the San Mateo County Association of Realtors. Some of the comments that Councilmember O'Connell made in changing the ordinance, and also as explained before, the two areas that we look at, and they're two sides of the same coin. One is from purely the ability for people to buy and sell a home. And that's to place all of the onus on this ordinance, as you hopefully have read in some of the submittals we made to the council and staff, at a transfer of title or point of sale. Whether you wish to acknowledge it or not, as you read through the consent decree, and I know staff, as unfortunately I have, with a big cup of coffee, read the ordinances from Pacifica and everywhere else where Baykeeper has struck, it gives the city the right to stop the sale of a home. And I'm sure that's what it means. So obviously we have concerns from the real estate side and how that impacts home buyers and sellers. But let's go to the other side of the coin, having delved into this with Belmont and Hillsborough and San Mateo and the County of San Mateo, Los Esteros Water District, the Montaro Sanitary and Water District, et cetera, that have all looked at point of sale. One of the primary things that we have noted and would ask the council to look at again, and it's part of some of the alternatives we've provided to staff, if the council wishes to pursue those, is the efficacy of the program. At the risk of repeating what you may have read, the property turnover rate in Belmont averages between 2 and 2.5% a year. 2.5% was in the boom days about 8-9 years ago. My point there is, if you apply a pure point of sale across the board, it'll take the city somewhere around 45 years to replace all of your sewer laterals. If you narrow your focus, and one of the things that staff has mentioned to us and that we've looked at is the, I don't want to get technical here, but you've probably read the report, is Orangeburg pipe. It is a particular culprit in this. We had a great deal of experience with that in working with the administration and the electeds in South San Francisco. They're overpopulated, if you will, with Orangeburg pipe. If you begin narrowing your focus, the efficacy of the program you're trying to adopt goes up, which should make Baykeeper smile. Because the propensity for Orangeburg pipe to fail, I mean, not just be repaired, fail, is far greater than other forms. You didn't know you were going to get the civics class on sewer laterals tonight, did you? far different than other piping. And so we've talked about applying this. You're looking at structures built in 1940 and 1960. That was the heyday of Orangeburg pipe because metals were diverted for shell casings, tanks, et cetera, airplanes for World War II and later the Korean War. Orangeburg pipe was trumpeted to last 50 years and be the panacea. In all due respect, Orangeburg pipe, if you haven't seen an example from staff, is reinforced tar paper, to be candid. So the point we've made in our recommendations for council direction is to focus on the areas, the hot spots, where the biggest problem lay relative to what might assist or cause the sanitary sewer overflows. In this case, the preponderance would be Orangeburg pipe. Is it the only culprit? No. It could be part of the pumping station, it could be part of the processing, it could be the simple deluge of a rain, whatever. But as to a contributing factor, it plays a very large role in this. So if you begin focusing on that, and then have your repair and replace program followed through, your ability to impact the reduction of SSOs goes up incrementally than if you make a broad net and say, okay, everybody has to do this, on top of which you have a point of sale requirement at which it's triggered. The point we make there is that in other municipalities and water districts, and not just in San Mateo County, but in the Central Valley and other areas, they have had for some years on the municipal code. Actually, you have it on your muni code that the property owner is responsible for the maintenance of the sewer lateral. But as far as I can read, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that responsibility ends when you get to the property line. Other cities, no, thank you. Other cities have the responsibility for maintenance of the sewer lateral as the responsibility of the property owner from the structure to where it joins under the street. And the point by that is it allows the city to begin doing a systematic survey of their issue with sewer laterals. And it allows them to place a time certain upon which a property owner must have the inspection. And if it clears, it clears. You get a certificate that lasts 15 years. Thank you. If it needs to be repaired or replaced, then that's taken care of. One of the things I did not have for you tonight, Connie, I apologize for this. I'm still working on it. There is a company that operates, actually they're working in Millbrae, starting in Daly City. I'm getting a lot of information. They've been in effect in San Diego for some time that offers, for lack of a better phrase, sewer lateral insurance. So if they fail, they'll go in, much like homeowners insurance, and pay for the fix. One of the reasons we're looking, both sides of the coin here are looking into it very closely, is that most homeowners insurance policies will not cover sewer lateral repair or replacement. And the reason we make that point is what we found in San Mateo County, the experience we've had with the other cities, is that in some cities you can find an inspection at $100, maybe $1.50. Okay. They run the video, they bring it into the city, they look at it and they go, well, you have root intrusion under your lawn, you have to replace that section of pipe. That'll run $4,500, okay? However, if you have an issue where it joins in the street, that's why our figures differ from what you've seen in the staff report. You're talking at walking in the door at $25,000 because you're digging up the street. You have to replace that when you're done. Usually you have to get an encroachment permit from the city to do that, plus other permits based on that municipality. So the point we're trying to make here is encouraging the council to provide direction to staff, to come back with a variety of alternatives that would be more efficient in reducing the sanitary sewer overflows by addressing the hotspots or primary issues that would lead to the most likely cause. And number two, from the home buyer, home seller perspective, to not tie it to point of sale. You can do it as a time certain. Now, very quickly, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. How does that work in the other cities? I've already sort of detailed that. What happens if the property owner says, I'm not going to do it? Okay? 5 years, 3 years, 2 years, whatever that city decides on, the city's crews go out and do it, and the property owner is charged that and an overage. And either it's done directly off the property tax bill or it's done as a lien on the property. That's usually a pretty good disincentive by the property owner to just blow off the requirement of the city on their sewer laterals. And with that, thank you for the opportunity. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Good. Any questions of Samcar? Michael?
I just wanted to thank you for all the research that you did for us, because you definitely did provide us a ton of information, and it was very insightful. So I do appreciate that. And it's really hard to dispel the fact that this is definitely not the most efficient way of implementing the program. But for me, the one thing that makes this program more, I guess, palatable to a homeowner is the fact that at the time of transfer is really the only time that you have cash that you could actually invest in doing this, whereas if we were to impose this on a more, say, expedited basis, the homeowner may not have the money to do it at that time, and it could be quite burdensome on them. So that's why I'm still sort of leaning toward this. I mean, how would you comment on that?
I understand that. That's a typical explanation given in other cities that we've dealt with and other cities throughout the state. The point that we tend to counter, since we are the Association of Realtors, is that while the housing market is picking up, and you may view this as esoteric, but it's also the truth, while the housing market is picking up, there's still a predominant number of foreclosures and short sales that are occurring for home sales. Our point there is very simple. If someone is going through a foreclosure and they are fortunate enough to be able to do the short sale, which is the lender and the secondary mortgagee accept a lesser amount to finish the transaction. And I'm not trying to be maudlin here, but if the individual is going through foreclosure, it's because they didn't have the money, for whatever reason, to make their house payment. What suddenly are they going to discover another $7,500 to fix a sewer pipe? And so that's one of the points we make on point of sale. Number two, and again, I sound like I'm harping on it, and I don't mean to. But if you read through the consent decree and you look at the other ordinances, it gives the city, again, this is not headline stuff, it's for real. It gives the city the ability to stop the sale of somebody's home. Now, if you want to get really down about it, in other cities where the broad net has been cast, that would also impact businesses. That would impact businesses that have decided to expand substantially in the city and bring in additional job growth. And I'd say, well, yeah, it's great, Paul. You know, that's all rather 10,000 foot. Yes, it is. I admit that. But it also is a very legal and real situation when you apply point of sale. So that's one of the reasons we come back and say, and somebody would say, oh, Paul, you're just doing that because it affects your members. They're going to make less money. Yeah, they might. That's their job. They're realtors, as opposed to a shoe salesman, as opposed to a furniture store owner, as opposed to a restaurateur. But the point we also make is what happens there ends up impacting home buyers and home sellers. And that's sort of what we're all about. Okay, end of sermon. My apologies. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else, Rico?
Mr. Mayor, if I may, through the chair, there's just one thing I wanted to add on. Mr. Stewart reminded me that I had forgotten to mention that we did look into the insurance program that some other entities offer, and I think it does offer some potential benefits for the residents of San Bruno, and we'll bring back all of that information for you at our next staff report. I would note that that insurance, that company has previously solicited some of our residents. We've known about the existence of that company, and they do provide insurance for water line and sewer line. I would note that there are limits on the amount of coverage, and we haven't had a chance to look at the policy yet, but we'll bring all that back to you at the next meeting when we come back with an ordinance.
Just really quick, Ms. Marshall, if it's all right, on the home insurance, yeah, there is external, there is internal. There are caps. Sometimes there's out-of-pocket expense if there's asphalt or other incidentals that occur. They also do help provide an offset for residents that you pay into, just like you would your car insurance. I hope not to use it, and it could be a backup of the facilities. It could be a leak, depending on what type of coverage you have. Like I said, there is out-of-pocket, but that has been something that has helped immensely for folks. And it does bring them forward to say, well, you know what, why don't we go ahead and get an estimate? You've got to get a few estimates, because in essence, I may get $2,000, $3,000. Sometimes there's a cap at $5,000, depending on what kind of coverage you want to seek. So HomeServe, Wesco Insurance are some of the agencies that are in the area. Cal Water, I know, provides that quite a bit too, which means South City, which means City of San Mateo. There are other cities. I think there's a few people in San Bruno now that have opted on for that program. I think that's something that we should bring forward to the residents. I know early on here, and I've brought on about insurance and having the city somehow be in between, because I think there's a value that you get from it. And that's something that I brought up years and years ago. So maybe we're going to bring that forward, and that might be good for us to help everybody. So I just wanted to touch bases on that before further discussion.
Irene?
First of all, Klara, I'd like, and I've never heard this part, I'd like clarification on exactly what a homeowner is responsible for. I've never heard in San Bruno that the homeowner is responsible for the sidewalk and the asphalt. But could you clarify, please?
Based on our ordinance, the property owner is responsible for maintaining the sewer lateral between the home and the main. They are responsible for the upper and the lower lateral, except if they will install a cleanout at the property line, which is according to our standard cleanout, then the city takes responsibility for maintaining and repairing the lower lateral, the portion of the sewer lateral between the property line and the main. About 25% of our residents installed standard cleanout, and the city is responsible for maintaining and repairing the lower lateral, and they are responsible for the upper lateral between the property line and the home. But the remaining 75% of our residents still are responsible for maintaining the lateral between the home up to the main, which includes under the street and under the sidewalk.
Okay, do we often have laterals fail in that area that we actually have to dig up this asphalt?
The answer is unfortunately yes, very often, and this is happening more and more often. If the property owner experience problems with the lateral, then they are installing the cleanout, and then the city will become responsible for the maintenance and replacement of the lower lateral, which is on other issue altogether.
Yes, and while I realize it's another issue, maybe we need to beef up our information about if you put this lateral, how much do you know offhand, sorry guys, how much a lateral cleanout costs to install? I know it depends on if there's
it's a few hundred.
sidewalk.
Based on my recollection, a few $100 certainly is below 1,000, a few $100.
Okay, so maybe in conjunction with information about the insurance, if we finally go that way, we can include information about if you do this, you're only responsible for X. So that might be something to consider. I just wanted to bring up a point that Mr. Stewart made about foreclosures, and maybe we need to look at tweaking an ordinance and adding a piece to it about that, because if a person is in a, say that we go change all this and go section by section, if a person is in that section and they are they can't make their mortgage, but they have a lateral that needs replacement, they're still responsible for it. So the fact that they're not going to yet sell their house, but they find a lateral that they need to replace, they have no money to pay for it then either. So back and forth about when they pay for it is, I don't think that's a significant point to make to change this necessarily. However, the other piece of this is I am asking staff to bring, I would hope we all would ask staff to bring this whole thing back a year after its implementation, whatever we end up deciding, in order to analyze if what we are doing is effective or not, and then it can be changed. So that's two pieces. But the other piece about it is, if a person has the difficulty and they are doing a foreclosure or short sale and cannot afford to do this, even though their lateral needs to be replaced due to damage, is there a mechanism that we can make that a consideration of that maybe it's, and I have no idea, that maybe it's piece of something or another, but that's for the legal people.
That's a difficult question. None of the other ordinances that we're aware of include that type of provision, and probably the reason is because it would entangle the city in getting information on private real estate transactions that it doesn't actually have a right to get. There's public data on sales and transfers. The city has access to that. Members of the public have access to that. What nobody really has access to is how much money people made or didn't make. Maybe it wasn't a short sale. Maybe they sold the house for as much as they paid for it. There's all kinds of circumstances which I think would result in an ordinance that would be really virtually impossible to enforce, I think, in a fair and equitable manner. And I think that's why you don't see that provision in any of the other ordinances.
Okay, thank you.
You have one more thing to say, Bob?
Yeah, I have a couple of things. I was just answering the question the first time it came up. I want to make a couple of corrections on the staff report. We didn't, the realtors did not, first of all, we weren't for the point of sale at all. So, I mean, all of our comments are if the point of sale goes through, we have these questions. And one was not to put in, an enforcement on a time of escrow, because escrow is a very vague word. We wanted a point of listing. In Pacifica, they have the word escrow in their ordinance, and it's very vague. When is escrow open? Is escrow open when you accept an offer? Is escrow open when you put a deposit into an escrow company? Is an escrow open when you list it? So we asked for the verbiage of listing, a listing contract drawn up. Two, to answer Councilman O'Connell's on the 10-year thing. You said in 10 years you'd like it to go up another 10 years. I believe the reason for 1940 and 1960, that's when Orangeburg was used. After 1960 is when they switched to cast iron. So it can still go 10 years after, but that's why that 1960 is in there. And to answer Councilman Salazar on the expense of it, what's our argument for you're going to have the cash at the time of sale, all that? Well, what if a house needs a roof? You also have the cash there. Are we going to make it a point of sale for a roof? If the kitchen is old, you're going to have cash on a sale there. We're going to put a new kitchen in the house. These are all expenses that a buyer has a right to, at this point, has a right to inspect these things, and it's all something they, it's the cost of ownership. And so we don't think it should be on the point of sale, because if you let this in, there's 100 other inspections you could do on a house that could be done at the point of sale if the city wants to. And if you don't believe me, ask South City, because they tried it. And they canceled all their point of sales, their sewer lateral and their home inspections, because they saw it wasn't cost effective. But my biggest concern with this, if it does pass, again, I'm not for point of sale at all, but what is the procedure going to be to check this? We've been told a few things that were proposed. One was a visual inspection, which I don't know of any plumber or city employee that can go to a house and visually inspect and see Orangeburg pipe. Orangeburg pipe is under the ground. It's usually 3 to 5 feet underground, and we were told it's going to be $118. I could be a little off. $118 for the inspection fee from the city to go out and inspect the house for Orangeburg. And so I asked. My question was, well, if they can't inspect it, and we have to do another inspection, are we going to get reimbursed for that? And the answer was no. Well, I can tell you right now, there is going to be no pipes, no house in San Bruno that you can inspect visually and see if it's Orangeburg or not. You can't even tell with a video. My other concern is If a sewer lateral goes onto a neighboring property, which, believe it or not, it's very, very common. You can have your house and your sewer lateral can go out to the left or right or behind you and tap into your neighbor's property sewer before it hits the street. And this happened to us a couple times in Millbrae and a couple times in South City. Who's responsible for the neighbor's property? Your neighbor isn't selling their house. And if I'm selling my house, why do I have to fix my neighbor's house? In Millbrae, it costs one house that I know about that cost the city the expense of the neighbor's house because it wasn't drawn into the ordinance. Another instance that we had in South San Francisco where it was deemed it was Orangeburg pipe. They dug down 13 feet, I believe. That's where it was built on a hill in the back, out the back. They had to bring an excavator in and shore up the walls. It was close to $15,000 worth of fees just to get to the pipe. When they got to the pipe, it was cast iron pipe. The plumber said, "Why are you changing this? It's good." Well, the city told us to change it. Well, the city said, "Oh, it's cast iron. Go ahead and fill it back up." Well, who's going to pay for that excavation that got to the pipe? That is an extreme case. But we need to know answers to this. If I'm going to sell a house, I'm going to tell these people we're the ones that have to answer these questions for them. So the point of sale is not the answer. It never will be the answer. South City has canceled it. If South City cancels it and uses the same sewer treatment facility that we do, why does San Bruno have to have it? They've told us it's not cost effective, it's not the right procedure, it's not the right way to do it, and they cancel theirs. So they no longer have a point of sale sewer lateral ordinance, and it was only in effect for, I don't even think it was a year. It was too cumbersome, and it was not effective.
Marc, wasn't South City's canceled because the consent decree was removed?
That's correct.
Okay. All right.
And if I may.
Go ahead.
We have several recommendations, alternatives for this ordinance. So there's 4 of them, plus anything else the council wants to bring forward. I personally am recommending the 3rd one, and it does not say anything about Orangeburg pipe. It is a video inspection of any pipe. So with the video inspection, you don't dig up anything. You do the video inspection. If the pipe is fine, Orangeburg or not, nothing has to be done. If the pipe is not fine and there's leaks, regardless of what the pipe is made of, it has to be fixed. The difference between having an ordinance where the homeowner is responsible for let me rephrase this. I don't think there's a greater public good to worry about or force people to put a new roof on or change their kitchen at point of sale or not. That's their business. If the roof falls in and it leaks, it doesn't hurt anybody except that family. I mean, I don't wish that on anyone, but I'm just saying that's the difference between that kind of requirement and the sewer lateral requirement, because we just spent over $400,000 because sewer laterals failed and flooded and ruined 2 houses, not their sewer lateral, their neighbor's sewer lateral, and their yards had to be replaced twice, and all sorts of other things had to happen. So that's a greater public issue that the city council is responsible to look at, rather than a single family's house, roof, or kitchen. So to me, I'm recommending 3 with the tweaks that we're looking at. I'm recommending that we relook at it. If you think, well, I think a year should be adequate to review what we're doing. I'm not recommending that we limit it to the Orangeburg, because you're exactly right. Why should you have to dig down and find out that that's a perfectly good pipe? If it has problems, you'll find out through a video. If it doesn't, you'll find out through a video, and it's a simple procedure.
Have you ever seen a video of a sewer pipe?
Yes, several.
And could you tell whether it's good or not? I've seen many of them, again. And I'm sure Councilman Medina has seen just as many in the business he's in, and our Public Works has seen just as many. You cannot tell if a sewer pipe is good or bad by a video, for the most part, unless it's brand new. Any pipe that's been in there for 5-10 years looks bad.
Well, I don't know what to say to that, except we've been told that that is acceptable, that it works.
By who?
By Public Works. I mean, that's how we do it. That's how contractors do it. That's what we based our whole sewer master plan on, is a videoing of all of the different sewer things in the city, so.
Well, I'm not gonna
I
argue
don't
with here,
know.
but
Well,
there's no way you can, a video is not a science of a sewer lateral. It's, if you've ever seen one, they all look bad. I mean, by a video, you're gonna replace 99% of the ones you're gonna video.
well, then to follow with that logic, there's no point in doing any of this.
Exactly.
Well, no, regardless of point of sale or not, because your other piece is doing it by section and section, so.
You could tell if there's serious cracks or leveling of pipes, but you can't tell if there's minor, if water is seeping out from, the whole idea of the ordinance is to stop the sewer from leaking into the soils. And if there's minor cracks, or you cannot see it in a video. So Burlingame's been doing it for 30 years, and they plug up at the street, they fill it with water, they come back 45 minutes later, and if it still has water, it passes.
Okay. I defer to that, to staff, because they know much more than I do.
But more important than that, I mean, everybody can argue that, which one's better. As a realtor and as someone who's going to have to be involved with this, we want to know what's going to happen when the sewer line goes into the neighboring property, and if it's after it's dug up, but it's found that it is not something wrong with it. Who's going to take responsibility for those things?
Rico?
Through the chair, I just wanted to make some comments, and I'm going to be all over, but that's normal. I think what would be the most ideal, of course, is taking care of the hot spots. That's what we did when we offered a sewer lateral program in a particular neighborhood. Maybe it wasn't as successful because the incentive was up to a certain amount. I believe it was $1,300 or $1,700. I can't recall. When we talk about having major projects, when we talk about doing mastic and staff comes forward, you're saying for us to do it because it's a hot spot, that we need to address it. So in essence, the ideal thing would be like the city of San Mateo, who also incentivizes. So they offer that opportunity. There's home insurance through some of these entities I've mentioned. There's also about having the city, through their budgetary process, offers, I think the city of San Mateo, it's up to $5,000. You have to get 3 estimates and meet some criteria. So it then offers an opportunity for people to do it and want to make that difference. So Orangeburg is obviously the primary problem, but obviously it's not the only problem. So really the ideal thing to me would be, let's deal with the hot spots that are in town. Let's know that all these great systems that we have in place, we should know these things. And I just say that as far as there's my ideal thought. And there should be a time that we go around as we have to repair streets and sidewalks. We're talking about sidewalk repairs and who's responsible. So there's all of those aspects. When it talks about Orangeburg only, and then there's the 2 points here of the 2-tier, I call it, the visual and then the camera, to me that bothers me too. To me, then you encompass all of them, because then you just have usually a method that is either the city of Burlingame or you have the video. You don't have to actually go drill there and then follow it up. So that's one thing that concerns me. I would like to get some more information on the foreclosure or the short sale. Obviously that does exist, that happens. As far as the 5 units or more on commercial, I'd like to have a better understanding. We certainly got a clear understanding of the condo. I'd like to also understand too about the shared sewer lateral, because it does in fact happen that you have to go forward and you're going with one neighbor, and then the 2 neighbors get together in hopes that maybe they can collaborate and save some money. But at the same time, if one is and one doesn't, it does happen. I've seen it. So I think that does need to be addressed. As far as any property listed for sale, I like the word listing. I think that's more important. I also think that we need to have some type of system in process, a system in process that actually tracks this, deals with this. How is the data going to be entered? And I know I'm always told up here, don't worry about the minutiae of things, but I do. When we establish something, I want it to work, I want it to be effective. There's a city of Burlingame that's been doing this for so many years. Obviously, if we reached out to them, I'm sure they can tell you how they do it and how it's tracked. At what point is it valid again? What point does it come up? Who's watching the videos? The staff time and costs. There's all of these things that I think need to have the broader perspective. Obviously, something needs to be done because the decree was there, and we have to meet some obligation. It's just a matter in which we want to do it. See if I had anything else. And again, these are just some of the things, and obviously, if it was going to go to a point of sale, I don't believe in the trust example it should be that way. I think if there's no monetary type of transfer, then that really shouldn't be considered within the policy as well. So those are just some of my thoughts to throw those out of where I'm thinking, and of course it's broad-based, I gather, but anyway, just to offer some of those.
Good. Anything else? I also agree that we have to address this pretty aggressively. I just had to replace the whole sewer lateral. I put in a clean out. And the city inspects the clean out every 6 months with a video to make sure that it's still in operation. And if it's not, they fix it. They did some videos of my pipe, and I kept cleaning it out 4 or 5 times, snaking it. And, oh, it's Orangeburg, it's Orangeburg. And no, it wasn't Orangeburg, but it was cracked because of tree roots and stuff. So I did the whole thing. Dug it all up, replaced landscaping, put in the clean out. It's an expensive proposition. But if I were purchasing a home, I'd sure want to know of the situation before I got into it. Because whether you can call it listing, escrow, whatever you want, if you're sitting there and saying, hey, by the way, we have an issue here with my sewer lateral, let's sit down and talk as part of the sales agreement, as part of the negotiations, maybe, so that the city doesn't care as long as it gets done. What you do internally is fine. But I think we cannot limit it to Orangeburg. We have to expand it to leaking pipes, if you will. Everybody said some great things, including Samcar. Also agree with your, transfer tax and payment discussion. Effective dates, I think the escrow thing has to be cleaned up, whether it's listing or not. But we have to tighten this up and get something that we can get on board here with. So I don't know if that's enough after we all spoke to give staff some guidelines. Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we're looking for some direction specifically about which of the 4 alternatives, 1, 2, 3, or 4, we should bring back. We can certainly incorporate many or all of the things that you've all individually discussed into any one of those ordinances, but I think to focus the council's attention at the next meeting, we do need to get some direction on that.
All right. Well, for me, I agree with Irene. Number 3 seems to be palatable, if you will, with some of the incorporation of the discussions that Samcar had, as well as the council members, and regarding some of the other things, escrow, listing, not so much point of sale, but transfer tax, those types of issues. And then I want a little more work on residential units. If you have a 6-unit building, a 7-unit building owned by one owner versus a 10-unit condominium with 10 owners and an HOA, I think it has to be cleaned up a little bit, or specified exactly what we're going to do with those types of things. Also, there are issues, and we just ran into them, where we had some laterals that go through other people's yards or front lawns and stuff, and I think we have to have some type of accommodation in an ordinance for that type of situation, because it happens in San Bruno.
So I think I've heard 2 voices for number 3, or is there any additional direction?
Michael?
Initially, I think number 3 was the one that I was leaning toward, but I heard the mayor and I heard Councilman Medina say they want to see something aggressive, and I think that the mayor's word was aggressive, and Councilman Medina said let's address the hot spots. But when I heard those, I kind of thought maybe we were going the direction of not doing point of sale, doing something else. So, I mean, is it a foregone conclusion then that we are going to do something point of sale, not something other than that?
Speaking for myself, it's not. I'm not sold on the point of sale. No pun intended.
Okay.
I want to have something that's. We have an obligation we must meet as a council. But at the same time, I want to know that it's going to run. I want to know it's effective. I want to know it's efficient, and I want to know it's going to make a difference. We're just talking about sending stuff out to residents about composting and the importance and that. So if I'm looking at the numbers of point of sale and what we're going to help achieve by the point of sale, the numbers really aren't there. And so, and I think back to when staff says, well, let's do this neighborhood because it's hotspots. Let's do this one because it's a hotspot. Okay, I get it. That's what they always come up with. So at some point, are we going to do the same or are we going to do it different? I understand there is more convenience to say at the point of sale for economic purpose, or that person maybe is choosing to leave town or whatever, or move to retirement or whatever. So my comments were all over in a lot of ways, but those are some of the things that I'm wrestling with, and I don't know that we have it solidly nailed down yet. And I think a lot of the questions that were raised by my colleagues and others, staff included, I think were viable, that we have to have something that works.
Through the chair. I understand what you're saying. I think, though, that to give staff either, what we're saying to staff is, well, it could be hotspots, it could be point of sale, and those are two different, radically different things to work on. And what I hear from staff is they need to know which is it to progress beyond what they've already done. So I understand about the hotspots, but just to clarify, is it Mastic or Mastic? Part of why they did it there was because they were also tearing up the rest of the street, and they didn't want to tear it up twice or three times, and they were. Go ahead, Klara. Am I missing something?
No, it's part of our policy that when the main is replaced, the laterals are replaced up to the property line.
Right.
And the specific program is for Shore Park. That is a special project for the Shore Park neighborhood, where the city offers that $1,700 financial incentive to replace private laterals.
Right. So I guess what I'm saying is either we tell staff, number 3, point of sale, incorporate all the other things we're talking about, and we'll discuss it again next meeting, or we say not point of sale, hotspots only, and that's a different animal. So to say either or right this minute isn't going to progress us at all, in my opinion.
It may not progress us, but I'm not sold on it. That's the thing. As it is now, and I'm reading a document, I'm not sold on this.
Okay, well then.
Specifically. So I've alluded to my last conversations about being more of an aggressive program that had incentivized, and I use the city of San Mateo as an example. So I have brought this up before. I have offered that as my comments and suggestions, because we've all talked about doing the right thing for all pipes in an aggressive manner, because in the end, we have to do it. So anyway, I mean, I know that doesn't specifically answer your question, but then you're asking me really on this to all the options are point of sale for the most part.
Through the chair, can I ask a couple of clarifying questions? So if we were to impose, if we were to do something other than point of sale, would it satisfy the consent decree if we were just to say we're going to be addressing hotspots?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. I think that the consent decree requires that if we were to propose alternatives, well, let me back up. What the consent decree says is that if the city council does not adopt a point-of-sale ordinance, then they must consider and adopt alternatives, which would result in essentially the same number of sewer laterals being repaired or replaced. So that's the very high standard that was set in the Baykeeper agreement. So when we met with SAMCAR, we requested that they provide us, if they had any information or data about programs in other cities and what the rate or numbers were of involuntary programs and so on and so forth, and we haven't received any of that information. So I think it's going to be, I won't speak for Klara's department, I think it's going to be somewhat difficult for staff in a vacuum to assess alternatives when the data for those alternatives is not really readily available. The data that is readily available is data regarding how many transfers or sales of property there are. And that's the reason why all of the ordinances are written not to focus on the listing or the escrow, but are focused on the public event of recording a deed, because that's at the end of the process when everybody knows that the property has sold, irrespective of when it was listed, who listed it, how much it was listed for, and whether anybody's going to make any money on it. So the only real effective way for the city to implement and monitor a point of sale program is to have it where the sale is what the trigger is, and not the things that occur prior to the sale. So having said that, right now, staff does not have and has not developed, as far as I know, any data or information about any alternative program except anecdotally. And that anecdotal information has been reported by the folks from SAMCAR, and I think you've heard the director talk about that. We do have hard data, at least for the sales, and so that's why we've proposed the 4 alternatives that we did.
Okay.
And one other question I had, if we were to impose a point of sale regulation, would that preclude us from doing anything more aggressive on a case-by-case basis?
Absolutely not.
Okay, thank you.
You have something quick?
Mayor, just one point of clarification. The alternatives, in all due respect, Mark, that we provided staff, some are voluntary, the bulk are not. They're just not point of sale. They're time certain, property owner responsibility, has to be inspected, repaired, or replaced. It's not like, okay, well, if you feel like it, go ahead and do it because it's a voluntary program. Yeah, there's a couple of those. If you read through what we've done, most of them are time-specific property owner responsibility ordinances, much like tree trimming or root intrusion on sidewalks. Just want to make that. Number 2, I may not be quick, but I'm slow. We have requested some information from other cities about laterals that were replaced via permit, so we can at least get some idea of the efficiency of how it works in others. I haven't got it yet. I will.
Thank you.
I,
All right.
I just want to follow up with one comment that Public Services made, based on your request last time, made outreach to other cities, certainly had a lengthy discussion with Burlingame and San Mateo, Daly City, South City, and has a very good, very deep understanding of what the other cities are doing and how their program looks like or implemented in a most efficient manner. I would just call to your attention that any of those volunteer programs require a investment on the ratepayer funds. The only reason why I'm bringing this up, I know how concerned you are for the water and sewer rates and how important is for your consideration. And all of those programs require a certain budget allocation from those agencies to support those volunteer programs, paying for certain portion of the replacement of the sewer lateral. This is the only program that the department is aware of, which does not require a specific budget allocation from the sewer enterprise fund.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, let's get it off center. So for the record, I agree in principle with number 3. I don't have a big issue to the chagrin of the real estate community with point of sale, because if they say it's not going to make a lot of difference, what difference does it make? And I think we have to give staff that direction with some of the modifications that I think are pretty clear. Irene?
I'm 3 as well. Again, with the things we've already talked about. And as long as we bring it back in a year with some solid data about how effective it is or not. And also, I think what Klara said was important. Just because we do this doesn't mean we're not going to do other things as well. But we just, as you say, have to budget that. I really think it's important that we look at the cleanouts. I mean, if you put a cleanout in and it limits the homeowner's responsibility, which I think the greatest amount of money would be the sidewalk and asphalt aspect of it, because you have to dig it up and replace it, that might be something that we could subsidize or push if it's only a couple $100s, or we could do something that way. So that's, I know it's a separate issue, but I think it's related to how this all could work out.
Yeah. Michael?
I think I'm willing to go along with that recommendation, number 3, as long as we're not precluded from doing anything more aggressive separately. I mean, I think I'd be, if we had the luxury of more time, I would say, no, let's go back and rethink this and do a better program. But since we do have a time limit and we do need to make a minimum decision, I'm willing to go along with it for now. I like Irene's idea of revisiting it in a year and seeing exactly what the pros and cons were, and then seeing if maybe by then we can come up with some better solutions.
Okay. I think you've made yourself pretty clear. Okay.
I usually try to.
All right.
On that very last point, if I might, I'm assuming that the city council is still looking at a deferred implementation of the ordinance, which means that 1 year of experience is actually 2 years from the adoption of the ordinance. Thank you.
Can I ask one quick question?
Sure.
On the time of the essence, I kind of get from Councilman Salazar, am I not correct in saying that because of the Glenview improvements that we got granted an extra year on this ordinance? So the time is not the essence. We have plenty of time. We actually have a year to decide on this ordinance. This isn't a deadline right now. We have a year, as I thought unless I could be wrong, but I thought that's how I understood it.
Baykeeper has tentatively agreed to allow the city to defer implementation of the ordinance, not to defer adoption of an ordinance.
Okay. All right. You have everything you need?
Thank you very much.
Okay, great.